Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, everyone, to The Reason We Learn on this Monday evening. I am so lucky this evening. I have my friend Barbara, or Barboo, with me on the channel. And before we get started with what I'm sure will be a wonderful show, I would like to ask you to please hit that like button down below and share this conversation out with anyone who might be interested in a wonderful story about an unusual childhood. And I think you will learn a lot from this lady and what she is here to tell you about her growing up experience. So share this out. Also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing if you want to get content about education, all things related to education, not just about the crisis, but what we're going to do about it, what we're going to build instead. And I also have a locals community I would like for you to consider joining at thereasonwelearn.locals.com, where we dive deeper into these topics. 2 Zoom calls a week. We can speak face to face, and I will give you help with whatever you're going through related to education, including setting up a homeschool if you are so inclined. So, with that
Yeah.
said, again, please hit that like button and let's get started. So, Barbara and I know each other several years. Oh my gosh, I don't even remember how long. Through Facebook, I believe, and
Mhm.
through some objectivist circles that we travel in. She is coming to us from Australia, which
Mhm.
in and of itself will probably be interesting to many of our American viewers because we have one set of stories about Australia right now, and I don't know what reality is because I don't trust the press. But um, I am so excited you're here to tell us about your childhood. Why don't you just start?
Okay. Well, when I was a little preschool child, I worked out a set of philosophical guiding principles. And I started doing that sometime at the age of 2. By the time I was out of my crib, which was like a month before I turned 4, I pretty much had my grounding and my sense of self, who I was, what I wanted to do with my life. I was very, very together as far as my identity, which really didn't focus much on things like gender or race or anything like that. It was all who I was in here. And this has, I mean, I can see that there's aspects of nature that helped me develop in this way, but especially nurture. I had 4 adults, my mom, my dad, and my maternal grandparents, who were really good at explaining things to me, breaking things down to the level of, like, my grandfather explained to me about slavery in the Old South when I was only 2.
Really?
Yeah. And he explained it to me in a way that I could identify, that I could understand. Like, um, you are owned by somebody else, and they can treat you any way they want, and they can sell your parents away from you, and that you do not own yourself if you are a slave, which of course was totally scary and appalling to me. And but my grandpa said, but then slavery was outlawed, and so and it will never have it again. And sometimes my grandpa, when he told me these harsh things about life, like when I was 3, I found out about the Holocaust because I was looking through a magazine. I was at my grandparents' house. I was going to spend the night, and I was sitting there. I would like to go and get magazines and look at the pictures. And I picked up this one, and nobody else was in the room. And I just picked up this one, climbed into the chair, and started looking at it. And there were pictures of really, really skinny, naked people who looked like skeletons with skin stretched over them. So when my grandpa came into the room, I said, "What is this? What's going on here?" And he explained to me a little bit, and I asked questions. He explained to me more, and I asked questions. And we got even down to the topic of scapegoats. And I was really fascinated and horrified by this. And I decided then and there that by the time I was, before I died at least, that I needed to understand how grown-ups could let this happen. How does this happen? So I had all these little agendas for the future going on that I wanted to understand more about them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but more than that, my mom, when she was a teenager, watching other people with their children, she thought, I don't think people talk enough to their babies. I think I think babies are going to be wanting to learn what things are and learn language, and I think in order for little kids, little babies to learn language as fast as they can is a good thing. So I think when I have a baby, I'll talk to the baby about how to what things are every day. Like if you're bathing your child and you're saying, I'm putting you into the water, this is water, and it's nice and cool, and if you do that every day, so you get the same words in the same context every day. And before I could walk, I was talking in complete grammatically correct sentences. So there's that. Um, Now I could walk when I was finally at 14 months old because I had these little wobbly ankles and extra small feet and everything. So, but but so anyhow, so therefore I don't know. The nature part
Yeah.
is that um, when I was born, I only weighed 4 pounds and half ounce, and so I had to stay in the hospital until I got up to 5 pounds, which took 3 weeks. And I was not a preemie. I was just physically small. But the night nurse told my mom, "This baby does not sleep much. This little baby will cry and cry and cry and let until I pick her up. And you can't let a little baby just cry. She doesn't cry herself to sleep, which wouldn't be good anyhow. But she
Right.
said, I I have to pick her up, and when I pick her up, she's happy." And so she had to carry me around with her. And she said that the day nurse told her the same thing. I didn't sleep much. I don't know what the day nurse did, but she probably did the same thing. So when my mom got me home, she found that I slept maybe about 10 hours out of 24, which is, I think most babies sleep about 16. But mom didn't carry me around, but she got a basket on wheels and put me in there and pulled me around with her, and that was fine.
Yeah, like today
Um,
people wear their babies. Like that's what
yes,
I did. I had
yeah,
a sling
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
They didn't have that then.
Right.
This is 1954. So
Right, right.
that
Well,
would be a while.
I'm actually amazed listening to your story given that it was 1954. I'm
Mm,
amazed they, they thought of that. That they thought, "Oh, let's
mm,
pick her up and carry her around," and they paid you that much
yeah,
attention. We hear stories
yeah,
about the past, how people were like children are to be seen and not heard and,
yeah.
you
Well, I
know,
made sure she did. I cried and cried and cried and cried, and you know that
good
that's not going
point.
to be good for a baby. And nurses have their own common sense.
Yeah.
So
Or did.
so
I'm
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, right.
I'm kidding.
But
Um, now no one has asked yet, but I'm going to ask and imagining a question others might have. And even I have 3 children. And
yeah.
I like to think I spoke to them a lot when they were small, but
Hmm.
the obvious question I think many will have is how do you know now or how do you know these are your actual memories or were these told to you by adults or so like I mean it's not that we don't believe you. I'm just saying I think
No,
it's
no.
so unusual that
If
the
people
obvious
don't
question
believe me,
is
yeah,
yeah, no, I do believe you
yeah,
because I've seen little kids that are
yeah.
like wow, that's scary advanced, right? But at the same time, were you remembering these memories throughout. So, for example, when you were
Yeah.
5, remembering being 2, when you were and so forth. So, at all
Mm,
times, you were
yeah,
continuing to catalog
yeah.
all of this.
There are
Okay.
no surprises.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep. Yeah. Well. Actually, I mean, if at the age of 2, this is I start with my series, my very first video about this development. Um,
That's with your mom,
I
right?
hmm?
There's one with your
No,
mom. You have your
yeah.
mom.
There's one before that
Okay.
that is the Barboo Chronicles,
Mhm.
and in that one, the first memory I tell, it's not the first thing I remember, but the first memory I tell is how at age 2, I'm sitting watching television, and it's a comedy, and there's one man is about to give another one a shot, and the man that's going to get the shot is acting really scared, like he's a little kid, and he's running around and everything, and I was enjoying that, and then suddenly this memory comes up from, it felt like it came up from down in my diaphragm, and it came up into my head, and there I am, and I'm a baby, and I'm lying on this table, and this man is giving me a shot, and I'm really upset because I think my mommy has just let this stranger hurt me just to hurt me, and it was really a trauma, and I'm living this over again, and but it's in my age 2 context, and I think that was a doctor, and he was giving me a shot, and my mommy wasn't letting him hurt me just to hurt me, and I ran over to my mommy. Well, actually, she says, I remember that I just ran to her. She says, no, I think you turned around and told me. And then she went to the chair, and I ran to her. But anyhow, I went to her and apologized for having been so angry at her when that wasn't fair. And she, um, and during that, we had the conversation. She explained to me what the disease was. It was smallpox, and explained to me what happened to people who got smallpox, which horrified me. I already knew about polio, but here's this other horrible thing. But that is when I remember my first remembrance of having what I call a mental flood of of um, implications and questions just crowding in so fast that I couldn't grab any one of them fast enough. I mean, everything was just piling in, and I had to stand there and calm myself down and figure out how to get back to them one by one. But one of the things my mommy told me was that she didn't know anybody who remembered that far back because I was only 6 months old when I got that vaccination. And I thought, but I remember lots of baby things. That's just natural to me. And I go back to them when they come into my head. I just like to go back there and remember and see how far I've come. I couldn't do this then, I can do this now, and stuff like that. And and mom said, well, most people don't even remember being 2 years old, your age right now. And I thought, that's horrible. That's like, if I don't remember that, that's like me now dies. I have to be able to remember me now. This is part of me. And so I said, do you think that I have to forget if I don't want to forget? And mom said, well, I think probably if you talk about it when something comes to mind, and you think about it, and you'll probably be able to keep it. I don't know, but try it. And so I did that. But um, I saw something on, what was it? It's one of those science shows that they have. I think, oh, I can't think of the name of it. Um, Anyhow, and I saw that apparently they have found that little kids do have infant memories,
Mm-hmm.
but as you grow and develop, those kind of get overwritten, and maybe they get overwritten because the child doesn't pay much attention to them. They don't, but I did. I I found that was very important to me, and I already enjoyed my infant memories and just counted that as part of my life.
Right.
And then at age 2, that's when the philosophical issues began burgeoning, because as I stood there, I think the first principle that I extracted from that experience was, you have to know enough to get the right meaning. And then from that, I thought, you have to know enough to get the right meaning. in order to feel the right feeling, because I got the wrong meaning and felt the wrong feeling, and I did the wrong thing. I expressed the wrong feeling, and I turned away from my mother. I wouldn't let her look at me in the face, and I fought her. And I don't remember this part. I don't remember the part where my dad comes in and picks me up because I wouldn't go to her. And the rest of the day, my mom says, and I don't remember this part either. My mom says I wouldn't look at her until the evening, um, which it was New Year's Eve, and they were supposed to go to the neighbors for a party. But she said, I'm not going to leave my baby.
Yeah.
Even with my parents, I'm going to stay here because I need to reconnect. And in
Right.
the evening, I got a fever and probably felt sick. I don't remember this part,
Right.
but yeah. So
I do have now that you're speaking, I'm thinking, what was my first memory? And I
yeah.
was 2.5. Because that's when my sister was born, and I remember it
Ah,
vividly. I mean, like, I remember the sound of the voice calling my name. I was just waking up, and I heard what I thought was my grandmother's voice. And I remember
mhm.
thinking, "That's odd. She lives in Chicago." I remember thinking this thought, okay?
Uh-huh.
And then it was actually her older sister, my Aunt Min, who lived in my town
Oh,
in New Jersey. And so
uh-huh.
she came up. They sound so similar. And she came up. She said, "I have to get you up and dressed. Your parents are coming home with your baby sister." And I remember this so well. And I even remember looking down at my sister and having a very negative reaction. Her, she looked like a raisin, like all
Oh,
shriveled.
yeah.
And apparently that was not very well received by my mother, who already didn't like me. So but
Oh, no.
I remember, no, it's true. And I remember the feeling, the texture of the little bassinet thing they had her in. It was kind of
Mhm,
fuzzy. I
mhm,
remember the sound of her scream. Like, there are sounds I remember. It's a little disjointed, but I do
mhm.
remember that. And then my next memory is nursery school. I think I was 4. The real vivid ones. Like, there are other
Yeah,
memories, but
yeah.
really vivid was I was sitting there under a tree, and I'm sure you have dozens of these, much more sophisticated than this. And we're thinking it was a sunny, beautiful day. Kids are playing. I'm outside and I'm just sort of sitting under the tree. And I think, this is good. I like this.
Hmm.
I am not going to grow up. I'm just going to stay right here. Like, I, I've just made this decision. It was like I thought about it, and I just thought, no, that doesn't look like a good deal. Not a fan. I like this. I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna be the kid. I'm gonna be the one. Like, I thought it was my choice. I'm just not going to grow up. That's for other people. I'm not doing that. So, but so as I'm listening to you speak, I'm like, now that I think of it, I wonder if a lot of other people have similar experiences where they just don't, like, you made a point of it,
Mhm.
right?
Yep, yep.
And so I absolutely think it's fantastic. So keep going, keep going. Uh,
Well, I wonder how many kids, if they were told when they were 2 or 3 that grown-ups don't remember being babies and don't remember even be I wonder how many of them would decide to pay attention. I just
yeah.
happened to get that information because went to my mom and reported to her that that now
So
mom said,
everybody listen. Your
yeah,
baby.
mm, mom says that I had told her other infant memories before that, but never anything that early.
Gotcha.
And I have I one of my favorite memories is, and it's a long one, but it has to do with my mom leaving me in the house alone for a few minutes, telling me, and I listening to her and only picking up one word that I knew, but putting it together with the fact that she didn't have my outside clothes. That's one of the words I knew at that point, outside. And but she was putting on her jacket and she was talking to me in a very comforting way. And I just figured, and she said outside, and I figured that she was going outside, but she was trying to tell me that she'd be back and not to worry. So I got that, even though I didn't have all the words for it. And then she goes out, and I'm in the house alone, and I various things. I'm noticing that I'm the only being, the only thing in the house that moves by itself. And I tell myself, I capture this idea by starting looking over here and moving while I look at everything that doesn't move by itself. And then that wasn't good enough. So then I started doing this and doing that again. And then I look over and there's a clock and it's got a little red line moving. And I'm thinking, that that's not, but that's not what I mean. That's not the kind of thing that is supposed to move by itself, but it is. And I was very frustrated because I wanted to understand it, but I didn't have enough words to ask what that was.
Right.
So, or even understand an explanation. So there I was stuck with that. And then the door opens and my daddy comes in and he's carrying an outside thing into the house. It's a Christmas tree. It's a tree. And he takes this tree and he stands it up and so he's going to trim this tree and he plugs in the lights, he strings them across the floor, and I'm thinking he's going to put that on the tree. I just why else would he have that in the tree? So he's and I'm just so excited. And but when he came in with that thing, it was so funny because it belongs outside,
Right.
and he's bringing it in, and I think what's going to happen, and so that was my first taste of Christmas, and I've been in love with it ever since.
That's awesome. I mean, it's so great too that you're like a little scientist. Like, okay, I am moving and nothing else is moving. I mean, just that whole thought
Yeah,
process. So
yeah.
now you mentioned a little bit before that you had begun very early to establish principles, that
Hmm.
you had principles. So talk to us a little bit about that and what others did you have?
Well, I've already talked about the first one, which is you have to know enough to get the right meaning. That's an epistemological principle. That's you need the full context in order to get to know to draw the right conclusion.
Mhm.
So you have to know enough to get the right meaning. But at that same afternoon, I just stood there in the living room, just thinking these things through, and I thought, okay, and I had the wrong emotion. I expressed the wrong emotion. I did the wrong thing. I turned away from my mommy. But you also have to know enough to get the right meaning in order to figure out things to do if you're solving a problem. But here we have, okay, oh my goodness, meaning, feeling comes from meaning. And meaning comes from knowing what you know. Things come together to make that meaning from what you know. But if what you know is actually wrong, then all the rest will be wrong. So I became aware that I need to look at my feelings and see where they come from. What's making that feeling? Why do I feel it? And is the basis of that feeling true? So right there was a grasp of the need for objectivity. So my principles began not with metaphysics, not with ethics, but with understanding the epistemology, that the need to know what you know. How do I know what I know? That was my big question. And I thought, okay, now how do I solve this? Well, I have to ask all the questions I can think of and have to pay attention to all this stuff that's going on, all the flashes. Those were implications and questions that were included in all the stuff in what I was thinking about, and all the implications of this new idea that you have to know enough to get the right meaning. And this new idea that other people don't remember being babies. And so that was my basis. It started with epistemology with an implied uh, the metaphysics were implied in that there is a way things really are, whether I know it or not, which is also I have all these phrases that I came up with and used multiple times a day. You have to know enough to get the right meaning, and things are the way they really are, whether I know it or not.
And that
And
is
then,
fascinating to me. The kind of the epistemic humility of it seems so adult. And even I
yeah,
know a lot of adults that don't have that. But
yeah, I know.
um that you
And
knew.
imagine me in a kindergarten class
Oh my
with that kind of
god.
mind.
It's
It was not easy.
unimaginable actually. But you not only knew that there was a way things really are, but
Mhm.
that you didn't know it yet and that you had to get that information to find out some
Mhm.
other kind of way. Like it wasn't going to come from your imagination.
Yeah. Well, things are, yes. I mean, it's kind of it's implicit in your knowledge, in your awareness when you're little. Because you're always trying to find out how things are. But discovering that something so traumatic, something that I had experienced that was so, oh my, it when I was on that table and I thought my mom had turned against me and just gone bad, I was totally alone. It was like the whole world collapsed, and I had it was a true trauma. But the fact was that that isn't what was happening. So there
Right.
was a way it really was, and by getting it wrong, I had suffered, and I had made my mommy suffer. Um, and another thing was, I also recognized that I couldn't have helped it because I didn't have enough words.
Mhm.
And so the next thing was, you need words to make things clear. And I stood there and put everything into words. And from then on, I struggled to put things into words, which I did well in my own words. I didn't know words like principle, but when I needed the word principle, I called it an underneath idea.
An underneath idea. I love that.
And that so um when I found out about kindergarten, we'll leap ahead to me um being just having a regular day, and my mom says, Barbara, it's almost time for us to register for kindergarten. We're going to go tomorrow and register for kindergarten. And I said, oh, it's time for kindergarten. Well, I'm willing to try it, but if it turns out not to be as good as learning at home, will you let me stay home? And she said, oh, honey, I'm sorry. I would, but the law says that all children have to go to school, and I don't have anything to say about it. I can't. And I thought, what?
Right.
That strangers are going to decide my education for me? My mommy and daddy, who love me and know me, don't have the power to decide this? That we can't all together, me and mommy and daddy and grandma and grandpa, if we find that I don't learn as well in school, that it's not as good, that I won't, that I still have to go. These strangers, these busybodies, who do they think they are?
Right.
This is not a free country. I was really outraged
Little
because I had
Barboo
been
for
told,
president.
yeah,
I
I
love
had been
it.
told that America was a free country. And
Mm,
to me, that meant you have your mind, you work things out for yourself, and you keep refining your understanding and trying to know what is,
right.
to make sure that you know enough to get the right meaning and all of that. And you do this for yourself. Nobody can do it for you. And that's true for every mind. Doesn't matter how dumb you are or how smart you are. You've got to do that for yourself because you can't rely on even the grown-ups to get everything right.
Now,
It's
I
your
do want to talk
responsibility.
about those grown-ups because Proto says little Barboo's thinking processes are unencumbered by dogma or prejudice or intimidation. Certainly now we see that, but clearly you were surrounded by very special adults
Yeah,
too.
four
So,
of them. Four
right. So we
adults
had
who,
four, but clearly they too we're not trying to
Mm.
pass on to you dogma, prejudice, or intimidation.
Oh no, no, no. Well, okay. Let's get to the religion thing now. Please, people out there who are Christians, Jewish, have a religion, don't be offended by this. I'm. This is about a little kid working out what she thinks is true and not. So, okay. So I'm sitting on the floor going into, as I called it. I love to go into things to find everything that's in them. That's something that I identified at the age of 3. So I'm 3 and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, I've always been like this. I love to go into things to find everything that's in them. And I'm looking at this, sitting next to this overstuffed chair and trying to figure out all I can about how it was made and what you'd have to know to be able to make a chair, and how, what kinds of things you'd have to know so that you could make a different kind of chair. Could you make a chair with 3 legs? You couldn't make one with 2 legs, and that kind of thing. So I'm doing that. And then I go into looking all around at the things in the house and think how much people had to know to make every little thing in this house, that it represents so much knowing, and all different people were involved in everything. And wait a minute, where did everything come from that people don't make? How did that get here? And I asked my mom. She was sitting in the striped wingback chair, and she was folding laundry. And I said, where does everything come from that people don't make? And she said, God made it. And I thought, oh, really? Well, I know the God and Jesus stories, but I thought they were like all the other stories that have magic in them, that the meaning is what's real, but the magic isn't. But, and I said, how do you know that? And she told me, well, it's in the Bible. And I said, but a lot of stories, there are a lot of stories are not real, but they're written down. But how, how do you know that? And so I began to grill her. And I wound up standing in the living room thinking, yeah, when she tells me some of the things that convinced her, I can momentarily see it, but then I can see another way it could be that isn't magic. This. She's not convincing me. And then here's another thing that I had a lot when I was a kid. It still happens, but when I was a kid, it was really dramatic. And that is, she in her chair with her laundry basket. In my mind, I saw her getting sucked down a long dirt road with dried up weeds on either side. And I felt like I was here in a barren place alone, and that I couldn't trust my mommy to, and I was thinking, okay, maybe it's just something that I can't understand because I haven't been alive long enough. And maybe I will understand it. But so far it just sounds like she's making stuff up. And 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 so I said to her, to test her, I thought maybe I can bring her back, but if I ask her this question, but she has to answer it right. And I said, is it all right with you if I if I don't decide whether to believe in a God or not, um, until I know enough to see it for myself? And
Mm-hmm.
she said, well, of course, that's how everybody should do it. And she came zooming back, and the image of her came zooming back and went back into place, and everything was fine. But then I began to wonder, wait a minute, this is kind of like Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and I had been doubtful about those for quite a while. But I found the presents under the tree in the morning, and so it would either be that my parents were lying to me and putting them there, or it was true, and I couldn't believe they would lie to me. Why would they lie to me? But and that was something that was very disturbing to me. Um, so anyhow, then that night in my crib, I was still sleeping in a crib at that point. I just lay there and thought things through. And the next morning, I thought things through, and I kept working with that idea. And essentially, I came up with the view that, well, God, if there's a God, and if he wants me to love him, he can't be the kind of a God that says, believe what other people tell you about me. Just believe what people say about me, or you're going to go to hell. My parents didn't push hell. They didn't. My mom didn't believe in hell, but I watched TV. I heard people talking, and and I thought, I think that if there's a God and if he's good, keeping an honest mind is going to be good enough for him. And if he's not, well, then I'll just have to go to hell because I'm not going to keep a dishonest mind.
And you knew this even then.
Yeah.
So Protos mentioned it being sort of a freedom test in the comments, that you
Yeah.
were not convinced by your mom's explanation of God, and
Oh,
you
yeah.
asked her,
Yeah.
can I decide for myself? And she said yes.
Yeah.
And that calls to mind something that I've thought and I've tried to teach my own children, which is that for me anyway, freedom is the ability to say no.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just no.
Yeah.
I mean,
And this is,
to certainly to ideas,
yeah.
you know.
And among the many, many, many things that I thought about lying in my crib thinking about this topic,
Yeah.
liberty was one of them. And the fact that I thought, oh, now I understand what Grandpa meant when he said, that how, when he was talking about how important liberty is to discovery and invention. Because my grandpa told me that.
Explicitly told you
He
that.
told me that he
Wow.
said that he
I
said
love
that
these
before.
people. I wish I
Yeah.
could meet these people. These people are amazing.
Oh, I wish you could meet my grandma and grandpa and dad. They're gone now, but you can meet my mom maybe
Right, but
if there
we
aren't
get to
COVID
meet them a little
restrictions.
bit. We're getting to meet them a little bit through you. It's always so
Yeah.
wonderful to hear about these people. So please tell
Yeah.
me more, 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 more. I want more.
Okay. Well, let's see. About you want to hear more about my adults?
Well, just a little bit more because, again, we most of us in the audience we're adults, either raising children or we have children in our periphery, or maybe thinking
Mhm.
about having children or
Yeah.
whatever. And I think this is so important because, you know, understanding the kind of people that surround an honest mind, what supports an honest mind, who supports an honest mind, I think is also important. Equally important is understanding what makes an honest mind tick, right?
Yeah.
So even just like you mentioned your grandfather, so clearly he told you about what, fighting in the war or something,
No. Well,
or
he
just
actually
about them.
didn't. He
Oh,
didn't
okay.
get the fight. He had one leg was shorter than the other. They wouldn't
Oh,
take him, and
but he
but
explained the principles of
yeah,
liberty
he
and so forth.
explained to
Okay.
me. He explained to me that 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 the Jews had been put in concentration camps, and that Hitler hated the Jews. He told me that um, that there was a prejudice against Jews because of that in the Bible that they turned their thumbs down on Jesus. And he said, but and I said, well, but those were Jews from way, way back that, and he said, yeah, I know. It's not fair, is it? No, that's not fair. Those people are getting blamed. These people today, or in Hitler's Germany, were getting blamed for something like that they didn't do. It's like if your daddy kills somebody and you get blamed, I mean that's not even your fault that close up. So so there was a lesson that about how weird people can be. But Grandpa also told me there was such a thing as scapegoating, which is you choose people to blame for all the problems in your society, and you make it out to be them, and then you can get rid of them, and so your government doesn't take the blame, or it's just a crooked way of dealing with responsibility and stuff. So
So he
and with
explained he explained the individual responsibility also to agency, things like that.
yeah, but I already
You already
knew
knew
that by
that.
then.
You
I
already
mean,
knew that.
I was 3 when I found out about that. When I was 2 when I found out about slavery.
Right.
And
Self
and
ownership.
one
Okay.
thing, none of this was, we didn't homeschool. It was just things that came up in the course of events, like like this subject was brought up because I was two. Now this is early two, the subject of slavery, early two. Um, my mom thought, okay, I'm going to take Barbara. She called me Barbara. My grandpa called me Barboo, and I loved being called Barboo. I called him Bapu, and well, he called me Barboo, not Barboo. Protos called me Barboo, different emphasis. But so she decided to take me on my first bus ride across town to visit my grandparents. And so we're on the bus, and a black lady gets on the bus, and she's very, very dark brown and has very African, exaggerated African features, very wide nose and thick lips and curly hair. She had an afro. A lot of black ladies back then would straighten their hair, but she had, like little short afro with salt and pepper. And she comes onto the bus, and I'm thinking, well, that's different. I had never seen someone in real life who was black. And so when we got off the bus, I asked questions, and my mom told me that there were different races and that they came from different parts of the world, and that there were, brown people and yellow people and red people and white people. And we're not white. I'm pink. I got very upset about that because and then when I saw my first Asian person, I was really disappointed because to me they looked the same color as white people. I thought that's not yellow. I would have thought the
You gotta
Simpsons
love
were more like.
children, right? Exactly.
Yeah. I was quite indignant about that. And when I saw an American Indian, I thought, no, well, that's not red. What's wrong with people? So excuse me.
So right away, you're looking at these terms and thinking,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
doesn't match
Right.
reality at
Right.
all. So
Yeah. No. So anyhow, but that's it. Just in the course of a day, subjects would come up, and I would ask questions, and my parents and grandparents would explain to me. And when mom and I would watch TV together, and um, just as an example, we're sitting there. I had a little red card table that I got when I was two for Christmas. And so they set that up in front of the television, and I would sit there and watch TV and do crafts. And my mom would often sit on the other little kid's chair next to me, and we would watch different shows. We even watched Perry Mason. When I was three, Perry Mason was a new thing, and we would watch that. And I was very interested in learning about the adult world, so I'd ask a lot of questions. And she didn't say, "Shh, I'm watching the show." She would take it as an opportunity to help me learn things. And I remember one time a commercial came on. I think it was for Silly Putty, but a commercial came on, and I said, "I would like to have that." And my mom said, "Oh, I don't know." She said, commercials are there in order to get people to buy things. And so they make things look really good and really interesting. But sometimes it's not as good when you get it as you think it's going to be. So what you want to do is imagine yourself playing with it, and imagine whether or not you play with it more than once or twice. Because when we buy something, the money we spend on buying that thing is money we don't have to buy something else that you might want more. So you need to think about it, and before, don't let them convince you to buy something. If you have to figure out whether you're really going to like it, because they're going to try to make you feel like it's great. And so I thought, oh, that's a neat game to play with everything. So I thought of it as a game that I could play to try to figure out and outsmart these people who are trying to sell me something. So
yeah.
it's my parents and grandparents took the opportunities, and they didn't they And they took it as more important, me asking questions and being answered, than, getting into the show. Now, of course, sometimes my mom would say, shh, I want to see this part. And I'd have to wait, which taught me to wait. And I was a considerate little kid, but I had this relationship, this give and take relationship with my adults. They respected my mind and the needs of my mind,
Right.
and I felt respected, and I respected them. And
And do you think that was because, it was sort of mutual? Like they
I think
respected
so.
your
I
mind and
think
you
so. But you see, the
appreciated
thing
it.
is that from the very beginning, my mom was respecting my need to understand words. She thought babies, when they come into the world, surely they want to know what things are,
Yeah.
and they want to understand what people are saying. And it's my job to help her learn that as fast as she could learn it. And she didn't push me. Nothing my mother did was pushy. I never got the message, you gotta learn this. It was all a natural give and take. And if I didn't seem interested in something, she didn't push it. But I was interested in just about everything.
Yes.
So, but this give and take was one of the things I remember lying in my crib thinking about. I would. I still wasn't sleepy. I didn't take naps as a toddler. As an infant, I didn't take naps during the day, except mom says maybe for 10 or 15 minutes after I ate. I
You
might
had a very
doze
active
off.
mind that will keep
Yeah.
you awake. I know that feeling.
Yes.
Yes.
And so I would, let's see, where was I?
So you aren't
Um,
sleeping.
yeah. So I'm lying there in my crib and I'm thinking about, okay, what my parents do so much for me, and my job is to learn right now, and mommy's job is to take care of the house and do the shopping and take care of me and answer all my questions, and
Answer
daddy.
all my questions.
Yes, that was part of it. I
Yeah.
thought of the job of a mother as the most important job was to answer all my questions. and 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 my dad, he went off and made money. At first I thought that meant that he literally made money.
Like went
His job was
somewhere
to
and
make the
like,
money that we use. But but no, I soon found out, no, that's not what he did. But what he did, I didn't quite understand. He was a manager at Procter and Gamble, and like middle management at that point. And he and I didn't quite understand that. I I finally summed it up in my mind as because from what he talked about at the dinner table, I thought, okay, my daddy has arguments for a living.
right. That's
So
funny. My dad was a lawyer, so that was literally true.
yeah, right.
So
So anyhow,
no, I wanted to bring something up because I thought this was sort of interesting. I wanted to ask you about it. Jenny says, I remember asking my mother what's going on at the beginning of a show, and finally she said, I don't know. I've seen as much as you have. That was my first realization adults didn't have all the answers. So you just mentioned that the job of the mother is to answer all my questions. At what
yeah.
point, I probably was soon, did you realize that your mom did not have all the answers? And how did you feel about that?
Uh, well, with the God situation, um, that was when everything temporarily collapsed inward. My mom made the right answer there, but then part of what I thought through lying in bed was, um, I have to figure these things out for myself. That if something, the things that mommy and daddy clearly know because they can take care of themselves and me, there's a lot they know that I can see that they know about life. But something like God, that that you can't see and you can't know, that's something I don't see how they can know it.
Hmm.
There's and with all the thinking I did about it, I saw that, going around and around, where does everything come from? But then where does God come from? But then I mean, it was just so circular.
Was that about
And
the same time that you, formulated the idea that there were things that adults should know and things that it's okay if adults don't know or don't know yet, or
yeah,
so I mean, there's your
sure.
mom is one adult, but then
Mhm.
also as you're busy thinking, because I'm we're gonna go back into you thinking about going to kindergarten. And
Yeah.
where I'm going with this question is that there you are already indignant
Hmm.
about the fact that somebody else is telling you how you have to learn and telling your
Hmm.
mom how you have to be taught.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of curious if before you went into the school setting or as this whole thing was going through your mind about why this is so unjust, did you already have the idea that adults I encounter ought to know something and that, it will be bad if they don't know it or it's okay if they don't know it? Like, how would you have evaluated that at that
Oh, well,
point in
let's
your
see.
life, 6, 7
Um,
years old?
well, oh, by the time I was 6 and 7 years old, of course, kindergarten is at age 5.
Oh, you went to a kindergarten at 5. Oh,
Yeah,
that is quite young. Okay.
yeah,
So now it's
and
like
and
6.
I
Yeah.
and it was shortly before my 5th birthday that my mom told me we had to register, so I wasn't quite 5 yet.
Okay.
And but no, well, you know, I already knew that adults could be full of BS
Okay. Right,
because I
because of the
knew about
slavery thing, the
because of
Holocaust
the
thing,
slavery
and that
and
you already
and
knew there could be some
and
really
Hitler
bad adults
and
out
by the
there.
time I was 5, I knew about the Soviet Russia, which I called Silviet. I misunderstood
That's
Silviet
funny.
Russia.
That's funny.
That sounds kind of pretty, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit more
But
prettier, certainly.
yeah, and so so yeah, I knew that adults could be dumb, but my own adults, see, I when my mom answered me that way about, you know, God, up until that point, I had found everything, trustworthy,
Sure.
and I still had was uncomfortable about Santa, but I thought, well, they wouldn't lie to me, so the presents are there, so I don't know, but it always bugged me, but so I knew that adults, and plus from watching TV, watching stories, you could see that some adults were right and some were wrong.
Right.
And I paid attention to that stuff. I loved to go into things to find everything that was in them. So that was my way of functioning, just trying to find everything I could, all the questions and everything.
Right.
And I mean, that was my way of coming at things even before I put that into words,
Right.
even before that age 2 thing. But I just didn't see how important it was until then. So that was it went from being implicit to becoming explicit at that point. Um, I Maybe I'm going a little off track here, but I remember the first time I did find out that there were some things my mother couldn't do. It was before I could walk, and I was just able to pull myself up on furniture and stand. And there was a big ashtray, about that big around, on one of the side tables that was, up above my head. And I knew that it was one of those Mexican ceramic things. It's very porous glass. And I knew that it had a man and a woman in it holding hands. And I wanted to see that. So reached my hands up to pick it up and bring it down. And my mommy said, "Oh, don't do that, Barbie. It'll break." And I'm and I didn't know what break meant. And I wanted to see it. So I picked it up and it was too heavy for me and I hit it on the corner of the table and it shattered into lots of pieces.
Oh my gosh.
And my mom came over, picked me up, stood me aside, and she said, "I have to go and get the what do you call the little tray to sweep it up
Right,
into."
right, the
She
dustpan or
said,
something.
"Don't move." She said, "Don't touch it because it can hurt you." And I stood there thinking, I hurt it and now it can hurt me. It's mad at me. So at this point, I was still having the thing that the idea that objects can have feelings. I broke it and now it's mad at me and it'll hurt me back. And I just stood there really shocked and just full of grief because I had destroyed the ashtray and the people in it. See, there were people in it. And my mommy came in and she swept it up and took it in, and I saw her putting it in the garbage can, and I was just heartbroken. And then she picked me up and sat down in the red striped chair and talked to me a little bit. And I asked her, "Can't you put it back together?" And she said, "No, it's too broken." And and I thought, she can't do that. She can't do that. There's, oh my goodness. And that was my revelation that there was something she couldn't do.
Right.
I was
Right.
probably a year old, you know, 12, 13 months old, something like that.
But it's
And
interesting you thought that it was if it hurt you, it was because it was mad and,
mhm,
those sort of,
yeah,
anthropomorphic,
yeah, right,
perception. Yeah.
right. And I
Wow, that's
remember sitting on
fascinating.
my mommy's lap and looking at where the ashtray had fallen and then looking at where it had been and just drilling it home that it would never be there again and that it was in the trash and the people were in the trash, and it was all my fault because I didn't listen when mommy said it would break, but I didn't know what break meant, and it was just, oh, it was very painful. But so that was my awareness that adults can't do everything. But it didn't take long before I was realizing that adults don't know everything and that they
Right.
get things wrong, and
Right.
that's just the way it is.
And then kindergarten.
And oh my gosh,
And what
yeah.
happened?
Well, I gave my mom a bunch of arguments about why. First of all, I had a mind to build. I had a plan to build a super mind. And my poor mom, when I was 3 when I came up with this plan, and my poor mom was, when I asked her, I said, I need to learn to read because I need to be able to read and write so that I can read about things and then write all my questions down so I don't forget anything. It would be so handy because I can see that, especially history. I wanted to know about history. And and my plan was that as I learned about history, I wanted to start at the beginning of what we know about history and learn it in order. And as I learned it in order, I wanted to learn what the people learned along in history, like um, just the various things that, I wanted to learn about those things. And I thought, well, my mind is kind of like that. It's, I'm starting at the beginning where I didn't know anything. And then I started learning stuff, and I can learn in the order that people discovered and invented and learned this stuff. And if I take my time and go into things and then, ask my mom for books about this topic and that topic, and what questions can she answer and which ones can't she answer, and we'll just build a little network of people that can teach me stuff. And that's what I wanted to do. And I asked her to learn to read. Unfortunately, and my mom regrets this deeply, she had read that it's not good to teach a child to read before they get to school, that
Oh,
you could get something like a reading phobia if the child isn't ready and they try to learn to read and can't. They might become afraid, that might get a phobia about it. Um, but also another thought, and she told me this, but she doesn't seem to remember it, and that is that if I learned to read before I got to school, I would be extremely bored in school while everybody else was learning to read.
probably true.
So, and I had to go to school. So that she didn't tell me that bit. I didn't know that until I was almost 5. But so I had this plan, and I said to her, "Do you think they'll let me do my plan, my supermind plan?" And she said, "Probably not."
Mm.
And so I thought, well, who are these? I called them busybodies. Who are these busybodies that don't know anything about me and who think that they have the right to decide my this is my mind. It's my mind, and I want to build it my way. And who are they to tell me where to go, how long to go there, and what I'm going to learn and how? And are they going to let me be asking lots and lots of questions and taking up time in the class? Are they going to let that happen? Probably not. They're going to do it their own way. And I said, you know what? If you have to send your kids to school, and she said, well, I'd love to be able to send you to a different kind of school. She told me about Montessori, but she said, we can't afford it. And it's so far across town, and we only have one car. And, they kind of let you go your own way, but,
Right.
we can't do that. And I thought, well, and she said, besides, we pay for school in taxes. And so we might have enough extra money for that. I don't know, but we already pay. We have to. I said, you have to pay for it and you have to send me. I said, that's theft. I said, they're stealing and this is not a free country. And then I said, well, look, if you have to pay for it and you have to send your kid, then it doesn't have to be very good, does it? Because the customer can't leave, can they? And they can't stop paying. I was so angry.
I wow.
Look, it's just common sense.
No,
Unless
it's a
unless
very uncommon sense, Barbara. I think you know
look,
that.
look, if you're coming from your core and you know your mind and you know what you want, then you know when somebody is violating your right to yourself. And I could see it. It wasn't that hard for me because I had built up. And this was not something I was indoctrinated to believe. This is something I derived from my own needs as a mind. You need to keep an honest mind. I saw that if I just tried to believe what my mommy had told me about God, and this is ironic because a lot of people are of the mind that it's religion that makes people respect freedom. Well, in my case, it was my need to keep an honest mind, which is true of a religious person too. If you are convinced that there's a God and convinced of your religion, then you have to go that way.
Of course. Yeah.
Well, if you're not convinced, then you have to go your own way. And that's true of everybody. That's why everybody needs freedom.
Well, you made the point too that in your view of God, that if he was as good as everybody was saying he was, then he would want you
Yeah,
to be honest.
right.
He wouldn't want you to lie. You know,
And besides, I worked out my whole ethics lying there in that crib. And I went into things and I really ground things home. Why is stealing wrong? Why is lying wrong? And when is it right? Because there are times when it's right. Like if somebody comes to your house and says, where are your Jewish neighbors? And you know, and you say, I don't know, that's a lie. But it's the right lie. So knowing those few terrible things, and mind you, if you have a child, you have to know your child, and you have to gauge whether your child is actually ready. I ask the questions, and that's how the subject came up. You don't push these things on little kids who might be traumatized. I brought up the topic with a little girl in kindergarten, and she got really upset. And looking at the kindergarten group picture and identifying her, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, you know what? I bet she was Jewish. And that little girl got really upset because I said I was worried about where freedom was going in our country. and that it might wind up like Nazi Germany or Soviet Russia. And so you see, I wasn't fit for a kindergarten class, and it wasn't fit for me. I should not have been there. And um, so,
Wow.
yeah,
So, but you got there and
yeah,
you're asking questions and saying things and scaring other little kids. No, I'm kidding.
yeah.
But
Just the one little kid.
just
When
the
I got
one.
that reaction from one child, I thought, no, I'm not going there anymore.
Right,
And
right.
I was, well, and see, there's so much. You want to know about my first day in kindergarten? What that was
Sure.
like?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't remember walking. My mom remembers walking up to school. I don't remember that part. She just says we were silent. I didn't say a word. So I get in the class and my mom is there and she's leaving and I start to cry. Now, mind you, what I'm crying over is all this important stuff and finding out that my country is not free. To my mind, this meant we weren't free
Right.
because in the most important area of my life, the building of my mind, strangers were coming in and forcing me into their program. And so I'm standing there and I'm crying. I'm crying really hard. My whole body is involved in this crying. And the teacher comes over and she tries to soothe me. And she says, "Oh, honey, I understand. This is probably the first time you've been away from your mother and with strangers. And, you'll get used to it." And that made me cry even more because she didn't understand. And
Right.
she was telling me what I was feeling, which wasn't why I was feeling it. And she was telling me why. And
Wow.
so, and I was afraid to tell her because in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know whether this is innocent and they really do believe that this is what they need to do to make sure every child gets educated, and they're taking this away from me and they don't understand how precious it is, but they don't know. Or maybe this is a scheme to take our freedom away. Maybe by demonstrate, because you can't. My view was you can't you can't teach freedom if you're demonstrating the opposite by your actions, that is wrong. And here this teacher is telling me even why I feel what I feel. And and plus there was so much behind what I was feeling and why I was crying that there's no way, I didn't know where to start. And I wasn't going to tell this woman that I didn't know who might try to, I thought they were going to try to brainwash me.
Oh, how
And
scary.
because I knew about Nazi Germany and I knew about the Soviet Union, Soviet. And so I didn't know what to expect. I, me with my multiple hypothesis mind, I, I thought it might be this, it might be that, but it really feels like it's going to be the bad thing. Well, I could not stop crying. And I was sitting there at one of those long, low tables and just crying and crying, and I couldn't stop. And the more the teacher talked to me, the worse it got.
Right.
Until finally she said the kind of thing that no adult had ever said to me before. She said, "All right, you stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." Now she had been nice up until then, but I couldn't stop crying, and I was crying so hard. Snot was running out of my nose into my mouth. I was gasping for breath. My whole body was just shaking. And then finally, she did it. She made me go and stand and face the wall. That was the worst thing she did. But in that moment, I thought, what's she going to do? Is she going to beat me up? How
Oh my
much power do
god.
these people
Oh,
have?
oh my god.
And so I stood there and I cried and cried and cried facing the wall, and I couldn't stop. My whole body, I felt like I was going to pass out. My whole body was, I was streaming with tears and snot and gunk in my throat, and I was having these physical tremors, and oh, it was horrible. And finally, when I finally was worn out and I went and sat down and I thought, okay, what am I going to do with this? I felt like I wanted to run around the room and tear everything up. And I thought, of course, I can't do that because that'll just get me in trouble and that'll just make me even angrier because I felt like I had the right to do that at this point. And I thought, but they have the power and they're not going to, you know, they're not going to understand me. I'm 5. And I thought, well, okay, I want to learn to read and I want to learn to write. Except the reason I wanted to learn to read and write was to build my supermind in my way. And now I can't do that.
And you had to
You know,
wait too.
now, yeah, and my time, yeah, and my time is going to be stolen by these people doing things their way, and and I, when am I going to have as much time? Before I would have had all day. Now, the hours that I have to be here, I have to do it their way, and
Right.
what's it going to be like? Well, I have to learn for my own sake. But you know what happened? First of all, in kindergarten, they don't teach you to read,
I know.
and uh, so I kept waiting for that to happen. And one day, and this was like in the second semester, when they had us going in the morning, then they had us going in the afternoon, and the afternoon classes were the second semester for us. And I I went in the afternoon, and we had it in the cafeteria, which was a different room.
Right.
Anyhow, there the teacher was they weren't teaching us to read it. And then one day, the teacher had us cut out comic strips and paste them on a piece of construction paper. So I cut it out, and happily I thought, then she's going to teach us to read it. And so I did that bit and pasted it on and waited, and that was it. The lesson was cutting something out and pasting it on a piece of paper.
I want to I want to, before I forget, because there's a few things I want to go back to. You said you felt the time was being stolen from you,
Mm-hmm.
and that you wanted to learn, you wanted to build your supermind and learn your way. One of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I've been saying on this channel, and I want to see if you agree, is that what you just described is actually the reality of every child
Mm-hmm.
going into the, compulsory school kind of setting where it's standardized basic minimum
Right.
instruction and so forth. And what some parents I imagine might be thinking is, well, but what if I don't have a child like Barbara? What if my child is,
Yeah.
not thinking this way, not asking tons of questions and so forth and so on? And, who's going to, this school's going to do for them? Or what about the other kids who don't have parents who are as wonderful as your mom and so forth?
Yeah.
And my response to that has always been, you're still ignoring the child in your question. You think you're not, because you say, what about the child? But you're still projecting onto it your adult fears about what it is and isn't going to do, be able to do all of these things. And you're forgetting the unique little being that it is, that came into this world hardwired from evolution
Mm.
to learn. Now, as you pointed out, there's the nurture component of, they're going to potentially be different
Yeah.
speeds, different levels of depth and
Yeah.
curiosity. But the learning is the thing that the human being wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't necessarily mean that school, as your mom pointed out, there was the Montessori school,
Mm.
that there's no room for other forms of stimulation
Right.
outside of your
Right.
home.
Yeah.
But the standard, basic, compulsory, everyone's going to do the same thing at the same time. We're all going to learn to cut and paste, and that's the end of the lesson.
Yeah.
And the adults lead
Yeah.
the learning. That's being imposed on all children equally, whether they're Barbara
Mm-hmm.
or the little kid who's where, Barbara was, they're at 5 where Barbara was at 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or where Barbara was at 1, maybe. Doesn't matter. It's still their time. It's
Right.
still their mind.
Right.
And that's sort of my sense of it. And do you agree with me about that?
Yeah.
That's kind
Yeah.
of okay. So I
But
feel like
but how you
it's not just a gifted child like you. It's
no,
every child.
no. Well, the thing is that the people that I've told parts of my story to, a lot of times, and the adult will that I'm telling will say, I felt that way in school too.
Mm,
I just didn't have the words for it. I didn't. I felt it, but I wouldn't have known how to put it into words. whereas I
Exactly.
put it into words. But that they there was frustration and all kinds of feelings like they would rather you know go at a different pace, or that they that the things that were frustrating to me are frustrating to a lot of kids. I don't know about kids who I knew. I, to me, I mean, as a child, uh, I found out before I got to kindergarten, I had just a little clue that I might be different. When I told my grandma's friend, she asked me, um, "You're about to start kindergarten. Are you excited?" And I told her exactly what I thought. And she said, "Who told you that?" And I said, "Nobody told me that. I figured it out myself. Believe me." And and she said, "Oh, you couldn't have figured that out yourself. Children your age can't think like that yet." And I was stunned. And I so many things were coming into my mind once again. I Nothing could come out of my mouth because I didn't know where to start.
Right.
And my mom spoke up and said, "Oh yes, she did figure it out herself. Believe me, she did." And so that was when I thought, when we were going home in the car, I said, is Lil right? Is she right? Am I different?
Mhm.
And I don't remember the answer.
You don't, it's
But
all the things to remember, and you don't remember
I
that.
don't know. There are plenty of things I don't remember, and one of those things is I don't remember what they said, but I know that it worried me. It didn't
Right.
satisfy me.
The other thing you said earlier that I forgot until just now is you said they were telling you how you felt.
Hmm.
I understand you feel this.
Yeah,
And that made you even more upset that
yeah,
someone was telling you what you felt, telling you kind of who you are to a certain degree,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, when I hear that and I think about kids today, so on top of
Mm.
the regular experience that you had, which isn't all that different from just the baseline education, and now we're adding the identities. You
Yeah.
are this. It
Mm.
means this. I am telling you what these they're anti-concepts. I'm telling you
Hmm.
this. And I picture any child really, but imagine a young you.
Mm. Oh my God. I no, you I would have look, if they were to outlaw homeschooling now, a child like me would probably give up on life. I mean, I would at least give up on society. I would want nothing to do with people that didn't understand what was going on. I would be seeking out people like I'd probably get on the internet and seek out Deb Philman and for support. But being in school all day, I would, as it was, Deb, I went to school at a time when individualism was still given. I mean, the teachers, most of my teachers, believed in individual rights. And my second grade teacher, actually at the teachers' conference, the second grade teacher told me that I was really unusual. Told my mom at the, she told my mom I was really unusual. I was the most honest child that she'd ever taught at the age of 7. She said that most kids, if they haven't done their homework, they'll make an excuse that like the dog ate it or something, and but Barbara will say, "Oh, I forgot to do it. I got involved in something else and I just forgot." Or if I call on her and she's not been paying attention, she say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was daydreaming," probably thinking about compulsory school. But
Like,
I would
why am
just
I here and not doing
yeah,
something I
right.
want to be doing?
And so so, but I liked that teacher, and she liked me, and she told my mom also. She told her, and Barbara is an individualist, and that really won me over when my mom told me that. I thought, oh, she sees something about me, and and she also told my mom that I really respected other people's property at an unusual level for a child my age. I have a whole story about that, but I won't go into it. But um, and so I felt so when after my mom told me that, I when I went into class the next time, and we had a little free time break, and I stood there in the classroom trying to decide, should I go up to Mrs. Tucker and tell her um, tell her about why I don't like school and where I've, where I've, how I think and all that stuff. And I thought, no, she might not believe me. She might think that somebody told me that, like Lil Fisher thought. Oh, I didn't mean to say her whole name. Oh, damn.
It's okay.
Oh well.
It's
I
okay.
don't like to tell the full name of people that I might later have some criticism of, but
Yeah.
um, anyhow, um, but so where was I? So I was like, I want to tell, I don't. She might understand, she might really like it, or she might not. She might think I'm a liar. So I didn't tell her. And because I never wanted to add more frustration and anger to what I was carrying around. I didn't like to feel angry, and
Hmm.
I didn't want to allow any extra injustice to happen to me because I
Right.
knew that I could hardly stand it as it was. So if I had no, I could not possibly endure the woke atmosphere. I couldn't do it. I would probably uh, get cancer or something. I don't know. I would just because one thing that would happen to me was that when I'd had enough, I would I would get really sick to my stomach, and I'd go to the teacher and I'd say, I really feel nauseated. I need to go to the nurse, and she would send me to the nurse, and the nurse would take my temperature, and my temperature would be high enough, just high enough that they would call my mom and send me home, and my mom would take my temperature when I got home, and the nausea and my fever would be gone. My body took care of it for me.
Well,
And that
it's
happened over and over. In third grade, I had a teacher that I thought didn't like me. She was kind of cold, and she the parent teacher conference with her was the opposite. She told my mother that I needed to learn to conform or I wouldn't be happy as an adult.
wow.
And yet, she was a really good teacher as far as she explained things very clearly. And she clearly, it her, took educating kids' minds seriously. And she did a few other things that I really liked. But she also did some things that were horrible. And I wanted to like her. And it was a terrible year. And there was one semester I was out. I think it was I think it was like 30 days out of it was something my report card. It's remarkable to see that I was out so many days in that quarter or semester. I forget what how they did it, and I think it was quarter. Yeah, report cards come out every quarter, and so I I was sick so much. And do you know that my grades went up a little when I was absent all that time?
I'm not surprised.
I swear, it was just amazing to see. And but I wasn't really sick,
Yeah.
except I was sick in here and in my soul.
Yeah. Yeah, it
And
is a kind of a soul they
yeah,
are stealing your soul
yeah.
a little
And
bit.
then in fourth grade, I had a teacher I loved. She was so funny, and she when she had a teacher conference with my mother, she said, "Well, the third grade teacher put something in Barbara's record that I is absolutely untrue." So she said I erased it.
Way to go, 4th grade teacher, I love it.
She was great. That was Mrs. Poppy. She was really good for me.
What do you remember about the other kids? How did you relate to them?
Well, I went into kindergarten wondering whether I was different. And sometimes I just got so fed up with kids being kids. And I had another thing is I had to keep a lot of my thoughts to myself. And I tended to have a, a, I had a more grown up view of things, and I could see when kids were had wrong information or when they were thinking in the wrong way or something. And once in a while, I just had to say something, and it didn't go well. And there was one girl in my neighborhood. She was a year younger than me, who couldn't stand me. And one of the kids that I played with, one I found that when I played with kids one on one, kids were smarter. They were better and smarter one on one. When they got in a group, they would kind of turn against me. And so, I had to, but I came, my conclusion was the right one. I'm early. For some reason, I'm early.
Gotcha.
And they will catch up.
But there is also a phenomenon where kids who, for whatever reason, are, um, you know, not as strong in their sense of self
Yeah,
as you were,
yeah,
when there is that peer pressure,
yeah.
they don't have whatever they need to be confident and defend their own choices.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, they wanted to play with you one on one and they enjoyed talking to you and they showed their true self. They're like, they were smarter,
Mm-hmm.
but they suppressed that when they were part of a group, likely, I can guess, to fit in better with the group, to be less offensive. It's sort of
Yeah.
more like easily accepted by
Uh-huh.
a
Yeah.
variety of different
Yeah.
sensibilities. And they lack that sense of self that you had to be the
Yeah.
same person
Right.
across different
Right.
experiences and environments.
Yeah. I suppressed myself when I suppressed myself, which was a lot of the time. Um, I didn't do it because I wanted to be liked. I did it because I didn't want to be mistreated and get angry.
Yeah, I just didn't deal with
Yeah.
whatever the
Yeah.
consequences. But I think
And
it's an important thing what you went through, because it also brings up an important thing for parents in general to recognize, and that is that it is developmentally pretty typical for kids to do what the other kids did to you.
sure.
Okay. And so now imagine, in addition to the pressure of children saying, you know, lower your
Hmm.
whatever, your expectations of other people, of yourself, your
Yeah.
own intellect.
Yeah.
Now the teacher is saying it's very important for you to find your place in the group, that your identity is part of a group.
Hmm.
So I keep bringing it up and contextualizing it in today, because here you had this experience before all of this, and you remember it, and you've just described it to us. This phenomenon goes on today, but now we've got teachers doing reinforcing it.
Yes, I know. That's what I mean. I would have lost my mind. I would have been a mess in some
Right.
way or another. It would have destroyed me. I
Right.
would have become, I don't know. I
Right. Instead of
Anyhow,
letting
but
the children become who
yeah,
they're going to be,
yeah.
you knew early on, I've got to figure out who I'm going to be, and I've got to make that's my project, and
Hmm.
I'm going to learn all that. And it's really the project of every child. You were just
Yeah,
aware of it and had made that
yeah,
conscious decision before they got hold of you.
yeah.
Most kids, if they were later and they go into kindergarten before having made that conscious decision, never get to make it.
Right. Yep. Yeah. If the school starts screwing with the development of self,
Correct.
then before the self is developed, I just developed luckily early, although they weren't screwing with self as much as what they're doing
Right.
now is way
Right.
worse.
Right. So that's why I'm saying, like, you struggled then, and no doubt others did too. They
Yeah,
just weren't able to express it the way you were. And now add this.
yeah, yeah,
All right. So you're there 4th grade, 5th grade. How did you stay in school all the way up?
yeah,
Did it ever
yeah.
get better, or was there a time period where you were able to
Actually, as far as the kids went, around about junior high school, it got easier to communicate, and it was more acceptable for a child of your own age to have these ideas and be able to talk about them, and it was easier. However, I was in theater, and my friends tended to lean left, and I never did. You know, it wasn't that I had a hard heart or anything like that. I just saw things in a very, um, I guess, little L libertarian way. And so, I found that often if I would start to talk about how I saw things, I'd get cut off, and people would be indignant and make assumptions right away instead of listening to me. And I thought, okay, this isn't going to work. And there were a lot of things I told myself, okay, I'll keep these things to myself, including about my early childhood. I didn't talk about that with other kids because that, I thought either they won't believe me or they'll feel threatened by it. They'll think I'm trying to make out that I'm smarter or better, which isn't how I felt. Um, I pretty much knew what was happening, and I had it pretty figured out really early. So, um, but I just thought I have to wait until I'm out of a place where I have to be. If I work someplace and things get too tough, I can always leave and go someplace else. But in school, it was compulsory. So squash, squash, in the closet. I was in the closet in a way nobody I knew was in the closet, as far as I know. I mean, well, I really wouldn't know, would I? If other kids were going through the same thing, I wouldn't know it. But one thing I also want to mention, though, the thing about reading, I had trouble learning to read. And in second grade, now here's this bright kid. My parents are assuming that I'm learning what I need to learn because they expect me to be really bright. They know I'm bright. So in first grade, they didn't realize. And I didn't have dyslexia. There wasn't a problem there. But in second grade, my second grade teacher says, Barbara is not learning to read that well. I was in what I considered to be the dummy reading group, the bluebirds. They were they were the dregs. And then there was the robins. And then there was the cardinals. And I was a bluebird.
They're
And
the
I felt
prettiest, though.
I felt dumb. I thought, I'm smart and all this other stuff, but boy, I'm dumb when it comes to this. How can I be so dumb? I was so humiliated. And what my parents did was they went and in first grade, they were using the materials that the school, when they helped me at home, they were using the materials that the school provided. So they went and they got a book that was not school material. It was a thick book like that, and it was very dry actually, and it was full of rhymes, but it wasn't like that. They got me Dr. Seuss books too, and that really helped. But this was a book that explained. Now we were learning phonics. It wasn't the whole word crap. Oh, pardon me. It
It's
wasn't the
okay.
whole word stuff. Um, or look say, I think they were calling it. But
Right.
my school was teaching phonics, but I just couldn't remember things. I just couldn't, it just wasn't gelling. And so my parents got this book, and and for like 10 to 15 minutes of in an evening, we would go over it. And in 2 weeks, 2 weeks, I went from the bluebirds, I flew right over the top of the robins into the cardinals. And even I thought that was weird. That was really fast. And then I began to think, my inside mind, that's what I had named my subconscious mind, my automatic mind, the mind that gives
My
you,
inside mind, I like
yes,
it. Yeah.
I called that, and I called my conscious mind my outside mind. So my inside mind had prevented me from learning from the compulsory people, that it was refusing to let me learn, even though consciously I wanted to learn, that my inside mind had. And when my parents got a book that the school didn't sanction, in fact, my second grade teacher in the conference had had said to mom said, well, we're going to have to get another book and do. And
Right.
and the teacher said, well, the school doesn't want kids learning from their parents. They're doing an experiment. Experiment. I still don't know what the experiment was, because they were using phonics, so I don't know what it was. But she said, um, but but she said, you go ahead and do what you think you need to do. And so my sense of things was that this book is not something the school is using. We're doing this as if I was learning at home and there was no school, and picked it up like that. Everything that I had learned up until till that point that just gelled and came together because it was okay,
Right.
because it wasn't compulsory. That's
That's
what I think was going
interesting.
on.
That's interesting. It's very possible.
Mm,
And I say that because I was put from Montessori into public school,
mm,
and it was extremely traumatic. And in fact, I remember in my interview with Stephen Hicks, I said that to him. I said it that way. I said I was
mm,
traumatized
mm,
by the transition. He kind of went like this, like almost like he didn't believe me. But I
mm,
think you will believe me that
mm.
when you
Oh yeah.
go from an environment where you are permitted to, learn at your pace and I spent lots of time in the reading corner, for example, and I wasn't yet hanging
Mm,
out in the math area that much, into a place where I said, now we do this and everyone does it. I I remember distinctly feeling like I had been taken from life, like real life. That was my real life,
mm,
and put in prison. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me what I did wrong. And I was put into 4th grade. I was the size and age of a 3rd grader, but they put me
mm,
in there because my reading ability was so high, and I felt it was prison. I felt like I couldn't understand what had I done wrong to deserve that. Everything about it felt like punishment,
mm,
and it did for years after that. So, um, you know, I can relate to that feeling of like, why do I have to be here, and why are we doing it this way? And I developed mental blocks against certain things to the point where my dad sent me to a therapist about it, because I wasn't learning certain things. I just wasn't learning them, and he couldn't
mm,
understand. He said, "She's reading off the charts. Why isn't she learning this math?" And everyone's zooming on by. And after this woman did all kinds of tests on me and everything, she said, "I'm very sorry to tell you this, sir, but your child is just not very bright. And she's not." And no, I'm dead serious. And you're going to have
yeah.
to accept that she is likely not college material. And this was
Oh
about
God.
6th grade.
Oh
So
my
I'd made it
God.
through 5th grade, like, by the skin of my
Mm,
teeth, a great reading and English and failing everything else, and you're just gonna have to accept this, sir, that she is just not college material. Now, the
mm,
secret that no one knows is that I intentionally failed her little tests. So you wanna talk about children whose inside mind,
mm,
um, doesn't wanna play with the grown-ups in their little games.
yeah.
I just didn't wanna play. I kinda knew what they were up to, and I didn't wanna do it. I was
Yeah.
mad. I was
Yeah.
angry.
Yeah.
So, but you were not angry though. Like you knew that your mom was doing what you kind of knew why, right? It was
Yeah.
never explained to me. So you knew
Mm,
why. And
yeah.
even though you didn't agree with why, you went along with it and you got into theater,
Yeah.
and that was good.
Yeah.
Um and so when you were all done, did you go to college? When
I went to college for, well, I went 2 years just with theater classes, and I had one of my instructors was really impressed with my papers. And he said, you should be going full time to college. Why aren't you going full time? He said, your papers are the best. And he said, and I said, well, what do I do? To me, I thought I was kind of do it. In my opinion, I was just kind of doing an easy job. It wasn't anything special. I was shocked.
Right.
And I said, what am I doing that the other students aren't doing?
Mhm.
Now this is in theater. This was writing reviews, writing critiques, and things like that. And he said, well, you not only say what you feel about the production, about different things, but you explain why you think what you think. You give reasons. I said, what else is a paper for? Isn't that what you're supposed to be doing? He said, he shrugged, and he said, very few do what you do. And I said, they're in college. And some of these kids, I was not even a freshman yet. And I'd been out of school for 2 years and was just taking acting classes, and he said, "Well, yeah, that's you zoom ahead if you just can't." And I thought, okay, well, okay, I'll try it. I really, really did not want to go to school anymore. I hated the whole setup. It just wasn't suited to my
Right.
happy way of learning. And, I was reading and doing things on my own,
Right.
but I thought, okay, I'll give it a go.
Right.
And I went for a year, and my experiences in English class, oh my God, it was just, oh, no. I asked my teacher, the teacher was good, but I said, I'm going to have to transfer. I went to the counselor. I asked to be moved to a class that was more challenging.
Right.
So they moved me into a class that was supposed to be more challenging. Um, it actually looked like it was full of football players and cheerleaders. So
How funny.
anyhow, and no, I'm not disparaging them, but this was supposed to be a brighter class, and they were learning a different topic in English than we had been learning. And I hadn't read the book. I didn't know anything about it, and she gave us a quiz after I was there for a couple of weeks. She gave us a quiz, and I hadn't read the book, and it was, I had like 10 questions on it or something. And then the next time we came to class, she said, "Okay, I'm going to break down the grades on the board." She said, "I'm really disappointed." And two people got A's, several people got B's, several C's, but a lot of them got D's and F's. And when she threw my paper onto my desk, I looked at it and it had an A. And I was just so disgusted. I thought, I didn't even read the book. I just used common sense.
Wow.
What I thought was common sense, anyhow.
Now
And
imagine.
so, and I was, now see, another thing is I started having depressions at age 12. I had my first depression.
Wow.
Yeah, it was,
Do you think
puberty.
does school contribute
Oh
to it?
yeah, in a big way. My first depression was after I had a really, really bad flu, and I was sick for like 3 weeks, and I got dehydrated, and it left me with a cough, and I was exhausted. I was just so exhausted. They thought I might have mononucleosis, so
Oh
they
my
tested
goodness.
me, but I didn't, and it was depression. And I had this big backlog of schoolwork to do, which left me no time to do my own projects. And I started feeling like the thought that was in my mind was, I'm halfway, even more than halfway through my schooling. I'm going to get to the end and I won't have built my supermind. And then I'm going to be an adult and I'm going to have to make a living, and I won't have time then.
Yeah.
So so I sank into depression. Now my grandpa had depressions too, and so did one of his sisters and his mother. And it turns out that I only started my depressions. My depressions tended to come in the autumn and last for a couple. The first one lasted like 2 months.
Hmm.
I was over it around after Christmas. I was over it. By the time my grandma died in January, my beloved grandma, which I didn't get depressed over. I've never gotten depressed after someone I love dies, but it it seems to be, maybe there's a seasonal affective thing going on, as well as the subject matter, that takes hold and that would take over my mind. And
Well, autumn is
was
also when you go back to school after the summer, and we
true.
know,
Yes,
the
exactly,
body
exactly.
has
Yeah,
a way of
right.
responding to
But
things,
it
so
started with that flu and having
right, right.
that big overload, and being enslaved to school even more.
Yeah. Well,
So
it does, it hits you, and I really wanna touch on the part where you said you were disgusted by that grade,
yeah,
because, that has happened to at least 2 of my children,
Yeah.
where and actually all three of them have reported to me times where they got good grades and they didn't even read the books. They
Yeah.
barely did anything. They just have figured out how to play the game.
Mm.
And while they haven't articulated it to me the way you just have, okay? I don't know if it's because they don't want to or they don't have the ability to. I'm not really sure. But I get the impression that it contributes to their lack of respect for adults in
Mhm.
general, that they have this kind of, I mean, they're more respectful than most. I'm very pleased about that. But there is this sort of cynicism that they have that I didn't
Mhm.
really want my kids to have at this age.
Yeah.
I think you should
Well,
be a lot older before you're cynical.
yeah. Well, hmm. I
Certainly not
started getting that
12,
way
but
when I was 5. So,
yeah, I mean, that's, it's when I listen to you describe your little self when you're
mhm.
thinking of the idea of your supermind
Mhm.
and then yourself at 12. Okay, so not that it's really in the grand
Yeah.
scheme of a life, it's a
Yeah.
blip, right?
Yeah.
Um, I consider that to be a tragedy. When I
Yeah.
think of
Me too.
I mean, I don't wanna be you are you and you're wonderful and all these things, but I just think of just in general, a child's mind. There it is, this
Yep.
wonderful thing, and then you have to sacrifice that thing that you wanted. I think more than the shot, more than that trauma, more than all these other traumas that this shouldn't have to happen.
No.
It just shouldn't have to happen. It's kind of when I talk to people about homeschooling, it's less about homeschool in the sense that like you have to be in your house and it has to look
Mm.
like school,
Yeah.
and more I really would love to come up with a better name. Maybe you can help me think of one where
Mm.
it's what you wanted.
Yeah.
Whatever that was going to look like, where you were just continuing to do what you were already doing. And as you said, we weren't homeschooling. It was just life.
Yeah.
It was just life.
Yeah.
I don't
Yep.
even know what we call life learning. I don't know. What do we
Yep.
call it? Like,
Mhm.
why can't, and people say, well, people have to go to work. And as your mom said, we pay for it in our taxes. So we have all these reasons, but they're not really reasons to a child. Even you
Mhm.
who understood the reasons in the technical sense more than the average
Mhm.
child,
Mhm.
when I think of reason big R, they're not.
No. No. See, the thing is, the thing that got me, even when I was first thinking about this at age 5, was that I had everything I needed to do what I wanted to do. I had my mommy and my daddy and my mama and my bapu, and they were smart and their lives were good. They knew how to live. So at least they could teach me everything they knew, and that would be enough. And when there was stuff that I wanted to know about that they didn't know, I could go elsewhere. And why couldn't, if there was a class at school that they didn't know enough about it, why couldn't, since they were paying taxes, why couldn't I go to just that class if they were paying for it? Why it, I thought about all these things, and and I thought, well, let's see, I was going somewhere with this. I don't remember what it was, but
Well,
anyhow,
that's what reason does. So you used
yeah,
reason to
yeah,
work it out, and
mm,
you said, you know, okay, I get the
yeah,
general size and shape of the
yeah,
problem, but this
yeah,
isn't the solution to the problem,
yeah.
right?
Did I tell you the part about when we were first having this discussion? When I first found out that we were going to register for kindergarten, and I talked to my mom about all this stuff, and she went in and she called the superintendent of schools to ask if she could just keep me out of kindergarten,
Right.
just that. And he told her absolutely no. And he told her that if she tried to keep me home against the law, that they could actually take action to take me away from her. So don't try it.
So I was
And she
homeschool
told,
banned back then?
yeah,
I
yeah, it wasn't legal yet. You couldn't do it. And and obviously, if you're telling somebody that you can actually take her child away if she tries it, no, you could keep your child home. She told me if the child had something wrong, and like if the child was
right.
um, had some kind of brain damage or wasn't able to walk or things like that. But and no, I did not try to break my legs or anything like that. but but
I can see
you
that
know,
now, like little Barbara going, "Well, let me
yeah.
see, what could I do?"
but but
I know
um,
mom can't fix all the broken things. So
yeah, that, no, but I but she told me what he had said, so I had that extra thing in there that was these people have real power,
that's
serious
scary.
power,
That's scary. Yeah.
and and my mom knew better than to lie to me because I would check into things. I would find out eventually, and then I wouldn't trust her. So she knew she better tell me the truth.
Right.
I let her off easy when I finally came to the realization that Santa can't be real. I was 5. We had moved into our new house, and oh, and there was other trauma on top of it because at 5 we moved away from that house where I was so, all of this thinking had happened, and that was a special place to me. So we moved, and I still went to the same school, but we moved, and and I also got a bunch of allergies to things
Oh.
I loved, cats and chocolate.
Oh my god.
And then I had a bunch of other lesser allergies. I couldn't eat eggs. And but it was except for the ragweed, which I didn't love. I was only allergic to things I loved.
Oh.
And it was as if my body was saying, "Yeah, life is poop. Life is poopy
Life
and you're
is
going to suffer."
life
It's like
is poopy and I'm gonna suffer. Oh my gosh.
so it was, and yet through all this I managed to once I could read, my grades went up,
Right.
and when I was able to spend lots of time away from school, my grades went up.
Right,
So,
exactly. At what point now, what my audience does not know about you is that
yeah,
you're an author, a published
yeah.
author,
Mhm.
and that you wrote this wonderful book, A Turn for the Worst. Okay. We both have our copies here. And this is a book about a little girl. This is autobiographical, I presume.
Mhm.
Right? Somewhat,
Oh,
a
in
little
spirit, in
in
spirit, yeah.
spirit. Okay.
The little
So,
girl in this book has more guts than I did as far as confronting things, but I didn't give her the same fear of being trapped, and that might not be too realistic because a kid like me is going to feel that way. But
right.
um, but anyhow, yeah. But
But we were
it's
talking before the show about how this book was in print for 20 years
yeah.
and it was only just taken off in print. They'd
Mhm.
stopped publishing it.
Yeah.
How long
In
ago?
2020. In
In
2020. So
in
it was published
2020.
in 2000 and went out of print in 2020.
Right.
And
And this is about a girl taking on the principal, a really bully of a principal.
hmm,
Okay. And the town has to sort of choose between
yeah,
what this girl
he
is
starts out as a teacher,
right.
and yeah,
And he ends up the principal and forth. And
yeah,
she is gonna give it to him, right? He's all about kids need to be obedient.
yeah,
That's what kids
yeah,
conform and be obedient, right? Which
yeah.
is what we were told historically the schools are supposed to produce, and she's
Hmm.
having none of it.
Right.
And her name is Astrid,
Hmm.
and the book's not in print now. People can probably find copies, I would imagine. But, probably look for
Yeah,
used
probably.
copies, things.
I've looked on Amazon, and sometimes they have books that like they really way overpriced them. I mean,
Right,
this book was selling for like $10,
right.
and
So,
yeah,
but
I have
maybe you can
my
find it, and she has her nom de plume is Sydney Kendall, who was
yeah.
also her YouTube name. So, but so you wrote the book. Was there an inspiration? I mean, a specific for in 2000, like I'm writing a book. What prompted you
Well,
to
no,
do
I
this?
actually wrote the book way before that, and it took me that long to find a publisher.
Oh,
And
okay,
the
okay,
publisher was Royal Fireworks, and they publish for gifted kids.
gotcha.
And but until then, I just kept putting it out there, and nobody wanted it. But um, so what happened? The thing that inspired it. Let me drink something.
That's right. We
So
need to
what
find
happened?
when we create our alternate pathway of education, we need to somehow self-publish this again so everybody
I'm
can
going to
get.
publish it again,
Okay,
and
good. Yeah.
I'm going to this time I'm ready to make my own cover for it and everything. So
Okay, good.
then you can see what I think that Astrid and Cooper look like.
Yes, that's what I want to see. All right.
They're so
So,
cute.
so you wrote a long time ago, and was
Yeah.
there?
Well, what happened was in Cincinnati, where that's where I was born and raised and lived most of my life, and there was a teacher strike, and it went on for weeks and weeks. And when it had been going for I don't know 6 weeks, anyhow, they were however long it went on. Um, the kids they were starting to interview kids, and the kids said, "I'm forgetting everything I learned. I just school's got to start again because I will have forgotten everything I learned, and I'm just falling behind and all this stuff." And I'm thinking, why do these kids not know that they can get their school books and read it themselves and
Right.
learn themselves? Why aren't they doing that? Why are they complaining like this? I thought it's like they've been trained to expect that they have to be in school to learn.
Yep.
And I thought if that were me, I would be really going to it just to prove how I didn't need school. Up your school. I'm gonna
Yeah.
do this better than ever. And I thought what would happen if all these kids got got discovered that they could learn better and more happily at home,
Yeah.
homeschooling,
Yeah.
and then when the school was called back in session, that they were resistant and they weren't happy, and there's some kind of conflict. Well, as I worked on the book, I actually wrote about half the book and wasn't satisfied with it and just threw it out and waited for a while and then started over. And when I started over, things I changed the characters of Reva Ray and Eberhard Helton, the two the outside of school teacher Reva Ray and Eberhard Helton, the teacher principal, and and it got much more interesting, and I made him more extreme. He had been
Right.
kind of ordinary and kind of believed in what he was doing. But then I decided to make him actually to be more of a kind of a narcissist or psychopath, a person that didn't believe. He was full of anger and bitterness because he was really, really intelligent. And I took the worst part of the moments that I experienced as a child, when that were only momentary, feelings of revenge. And and I put them all in him. I made him that, and driven by that.
But
And
I think those people do exist.
oh yeah,
Just
oh
so you
yeah,
know, I really
yes
do
I do,
believe they exist
I
and they
do.
are teaching in schools.
And I gave him parents who were very extremely dogmatic, in a religious cult. Actually, they weren't normal Christians. They were in a religious cult that kind of resembled Christianity, but no, it was totally irrational.
Sure.
And and so, you know, you wouldn't you wouldn't recognize that. You would recognize it as a cult.
Right.
And and his sister was very different from him, and she took a very different take, and she was the scapegoat in the family.
Right.
She was treated she was blamed for everything, and he was glorified because he learned to play the game really well
Right.
and had total contempt for everybody,
Wow.
and just manipulated them like a king. And his sister um, took the opposite. She took all the punishment and kept herself.
Right.
And so that's what we have, this tension between these two people,
Right.
and then the children.
Well, I think it would be a great book for people to get and read and think about some of these issues because we just had a whole year of lockdown. Kids were out of school and people were sort of begging, to get their kids back in school. And the whole while I'm making videos like, why? Like, what do you for what purpose? To continue this indoctrination and so forth. So I actually thought it was sort of a good thing for them to be home. Now I understand the economics of it, that it put people in a tough place as far as childcare, but, um, as far as learning, it was sad to me how much learning loss took place because, like you said, people have been conditioned, parents have been conditioned, kids have been conditioned that learning has to happen at school, that
Yeah.
the only people who could teach them or, help them with this are inside of school. And then of course the money's already taken and so forth. So now I forgot to mention at the outset of this conversation that I brought you on, and it's Proto's fault really. He had in one of the title suggestions, he had why we need freedom. And it inspired me, thank you, Protos. It inspired me to start a series. As I told you before we started, that
Mhm.
I want to start a series bringing people on. You're my first, to talk about their own personal experience, life story, whatever it is, whatever they want to bring to it that helps explain why we need freedom. And I think you've just given us a wonderful example of why do we need freedom? Because, right? How else are we going to develop our
Yeah.
minds? Um, so you've answered some of, you've answered questions around that already so well, but if I put it to you directly, where does liberty come from? What would you say?
Well, to take it from my own experience, the need for liberty comes from the need of the mind to keep itself honest. And keeping your mind honest means holding yourself responsible to finding all the questions you need to ask and being aware of when you might not know enough. This is all based on what I discovered really early, and that we all need to be free to do that. It doesn't matter how bright or dull or what you may be. Your mind needs to understand things for itself and to do its work to try to grasp what is real and what isn't, and to grasp the biggest picture that you're able to grasp.
That's
And that
wonderful.
is your job. And if you have people telling you what to think and what not to think, if you have people telling you to shut up, then you can't have an exchange of ideas. You can't refine your own ideas or correct your own ideas. And people all start following in lockstep in order to not be punished. And then truth and reality gets undermined. And then life becomes a wreck. That you need to, that is what the human mind needs to do. And you cannot, when you, there's a boundary between your mind and mine. We can talk about things and explain things, but only inside your own mind can you work out whether the person you're talking to is telling you the truth, if they know what they're talking about, if they're mistaken, and so forth. You, that's your job, to keep yourself on the alert for your own errors and other people's errors. And some people are going to be way better at it than others, or some people are way better at it in their specialty area and not other areas. And if you don't have the freedom to exchange ideas and to go your own way, if other people can force you to submit to their view when you don't know if they're right or not, then that is just the, what's the word I'm looking for? That is the squashing of the human spirit. That is the, that undermines your your zest for living and for being the best mind, the best human that you can be. And if you're undercutting that, that's not helpful to anyone, not the whole society, not the individual, because society is made up of individuals. And if they are, it's bad enough that a lot of people don't use this to the best of their ability, and people, it's pretty common for people in one area or another to try to avoid facing the facts. That's a normal human temptation. I don't want to be at the mercy of people who are doing that. But how do you know? If you look at totalitarian governments, they were always pushing some false idea on people and driving their people into poverty and starvation because their idea was wrong. It didn't work.
Right.
So when you have people looking at things from different angles and coming up with a better understanding, some
Mhm.
people in some areas and some in others, and hashing it out, you're going to get the best. You have the best chance
Right.
of getting to the whole truth and nothing but the truth, which is what we need to aim for, even though we we're not omniscient and we're going to make mistakes. You need
Mm,
freedom for that.
that's great. Wow, I feel really inspired,
Yay.
because yeah, no, I mean, it's weird when you listen to someone like you talk and it's on the one hand, it puts everything that's happening in education in America and or around the world really in stark relief. And it would be tempting, to get sad and despondent about it. But on the other hand, it inspires me to push harder and work harder and focus more on building something else. So not just homeschooling. I mean, we have that. That's I feel like the stopgap at the moment. Like get out and do it yourself. But I know there are other people like me out there now because I started doing this work. And I know they're as committed to finding alternatives as I am. And now I feel like
I love them.
more driven than ever before to find a way to link arms with them and just say, what are we going to, we have to start building. I think we've done a very good job of exploring the problem, defining the problem. Okay, it's time to get moving. It's time to get working and save the Barbaras of today. And even the ones who aren't Barbara, they're on their way. They have whatever is going on up in there is theirs and not ours. And I really want to help build an alternative that provides every parent, ideally, with that option, with that option, at least to surround their child with adults like you were surrounded by. We don't all have that wonderful
I
gift
know.
of,
Yeah.
wonderful parents or wonderful grandparents,
Mm-hmm.
but those people exist. Wonderful people exist and
Yeah.
they are out there, and I know there are more of them that would love to be able to help children and influence children's minds than we know about, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they show up in an education school with a
Right.
certification program and so forth.
Right.
So listening to you has just really made, it's concretized it for me in a way that I really am grateful to you for doing, because
Well,
I came to the conversation just excited to hear the story, and now I feel like you've given me a present.
you've given me a present because one thing I didn't mention was on that first day of kindergarten when I came home and I was standing by my little red card table and I was saying to my mommy, nobody understands. Nobody understands the underneath idea of right and wrong and freedom, or they wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
And I made the promise to myself that when I grew up, I would I would keep all these memories. I was not going to let them take myself away from myself. And I was going to keep these memories and I was going to write about it and tell the world what I had been thinking um, up all the thinking I'd done up until that day, and I was going to tell them why I was crying in kindergarten, the real reason. And I'm doing that through my series, but this is like a good condensed introduction.
That's great.
And
And
I am
now I
so
want to
grateful
direct
because
everyone.
now I'm 67 years old, and now here it is. And you have opened this gate for me. So thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you're doing
Oh,
because I've told you many times
yeah.
how much I appreciate it.
Well, I consider it a kind of a moral obligation in a way, because if you know a thing and you're capable of sharing that information with other people, whatever they do with it, they do with it. But
Yeah.
if you really believe that something is right, and you have the ability to share that information, I feel like you kind of have to. Now I want to make sure I get the website for people. It's Barboo Chronicles. Is it just that barboochronicles.com?
It's just barboo.com.
It's just barboo.com. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you want to follow the the story in much more depth, and you get to hear from her mom, who is wonderful. You can go to barboo.com and follow the Barboo Chronicles, and I understand there'll be another episode coming soon.
Mhm.
Um, and you can learn much more about this from Barbara. But I wanted to, as you said, get the condensed version, and I hope others who have listened tonight will be inspired to consider these things and how we educate our children, how we think about our children, how we think about the mind in general, even our own as adults. Remember back
Yeah.
to when you were little. So I cannot thank you enough. This has been wonderful. And of course
I
you are
can't thank
welcome.
you
You
enough.
and your wonderful husband are welcome back here anytime.
Oh,
The
great. I'd
door
love
the
to
door
come
is
back.
always open. So thank you to everyone for watching. And I hope if you enjoyed this, remember to hit the like button, share it with others who think would benefit from this, and have a wonderful evening.